We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk, 1180, 1230, KGEO, 1410, KERI, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in 1000 KKIM, and now in the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area on KNOOKmedium.net. .com. I keep on saying .net. .com. We have a fascinating guest by phone today, Howard Blum, talking about his new book, Dark Invasion, 1915, Germany's Secret War Against America. So, Howard, when Chuck sent me the information about your book, he was talking about Bradley Cooper's going to have something to do with your book. Can you, or the results of your book, can you talk about what Bradley Cooper's involvement is going to be?
Yes. When the book was just finished, well, still in manuscript, Bradley Cooper got a hold of it and said, this is an interesting story. I want to be involved. And he became the producer. The book was sold to Warner Brothers, and Bradley is going to play Detective Tom Tunney. You know, in American Hustle, where he's nominated for an Academy Award, he plays a 1970s FBI man, and next he's going to be playing a 1915 New York City cop chasing spies and terrorists.
You know, I think he'd be perfect at that role. I'm a big Bradley Cooper fan, and one of my favorite shows on TV is a show called Inside the Actor's Studio. We're trying to get James Lipton on. It would be great to have him on. But I guess Bradley Cooper is a graduate from the Actor's Studio in New York, and he would be perfect at that kind of role. So he's
a very intelligent actor. Uh-huh. He's fun to talk to. He gets the book. He cares about history, and he also, I think, cares about the underlying story about the birth of terrorism in the United States. You know, terrorism is now part of our DNA. My kids grow up living in a world where there's a great deal of fear. You have to worry what's happening next. And these incidents in 1915, this first attack on the homeland, is where it all started.
Howard, what was the motivation to write this book, and then how long did it take to do the research and put it together?
Well, as I said, we first became involved. I was a reporter at the New York Times for about a decade, so you read lots of things, and you like looking for stories. And I saw this story that the CIA had written in their Annals of Intelligence. It's an unclassified journal that the CIA puts out. It's rather historical. And they talked about these events in 1915, and I thought, well, this is pretty interesting. If I could find a hook into this story, a way into this story, and the hook was Captain Tom Tunney. He wrote his memoirs, and there was letters he had written. You can go to the house where he lived in Brooklyn. Today it's still there. And I thought, well, I could build a story around this, and it seemed to have hit a nerve with some people, or at least with Bradley Cooper, because then Bradley Cooper read it and he said, well, he wants to be Tom Tunney.
You know, I'll tell you one of the things that's interesting to me, Howard, when I look at this story. It seems like the Germans made and the Japanese made, and I think the Muslims are making, when it comes to terrorism, the same mistake when they look at the United States. I love Yamamoto's comment after the attack on Pearl Harbor. He said, "We've awoken a sleeping giant." I think countries misunderstand the American psyche, and when they do these kind of things, they don't realize that we will react just like we did, right or wrong, in Afghanistan and Iraq, and like we did after Pearl Harbor. Do you agree with that?
I think you've hit the nail right on the head. You take the anthrax attack that happened in 1915. Mustard gas is being used on the battlefields of Europe. So the German high command figures, well, okay, we'll bring anthrax to the United States. They had been developing anthrax and glanders to use against animals in laboratories in Germany, but they didn't quite have the nerve to use it. Finally decided they're going to cross this line. They cross this line. They bring in a doctor who was born in the United States, but studied medicine at the University of Heidelberg. His father had been a German citizen, came to the United States, and then won the Congressional Medal of Honor in the Civil War. And he was going to be their spy master, their germ master. He comes here, he sets up this laboratory, and there are a series of mysterious deaths. And this is when the information gets passed to President Wilson that things are getting out of hand. And he approaches the German ambassador, and they tell them that if this continues, the United States is going to have no choice but to go to war. And the German ambassador denies that these anthrax attacks are taking place, but they withdraw their agent this Dr. Anton Dilger from the Washington area, and the anthrax attacks stopped. But the American patience is rapidly coming to an end, and finally, America decides they've had enough. The war is declared in April 1917, and 2 months later, there's a Flag Day speech that President Wilson gives, and it's a very personal, revelatory speech. He's personally enraged by the way the German ambassador has treated America. He considered the German ambassador a friend. He considered the German diplomats to be friends. And he is personally, deeply surprised and upset that guests in this country could act this way. Imagine how naive that seems today.
Yeah.
And he said this is one of the reasons that pushed us to war. What choice does a great nation have but to respond to such sabotage and to such threats and to such actions except to declare war?
Yeah. Our guest by phone, Howard Blum, author of Dark Invasion, 1915, Germany's Secret War Against America.
So, Howard, is this actually going to become a movie, do you think?
I've read the script. The script is wonderful. It's very exciting. It's a cat and mouse game between Captain Tom Tunney on one hand. On the other side, there's the German spy master who comes to America, Franz von Rittlen. Rittlen is an aristocratic German. He lives at the New York Yacht Club, which is a posh address in New York, and he seems to be a man about town, but he really is the brains who's manipulating all these different threads. He said he's come to America to declare war single-handedly against the 48 states, and he goes about doing this by spreading assassinations, germ warfare, and bombs. And he leads this attack, and the battle between the two of them, this cat-and-mouse game through 1915 America, I think will make for an exciting movie.
Are you still involved with the Times, or have you moved on and just become an author now?
I'm just an author. Times is a great place to be, but it's sort of a young man's job when you you get there, 9 in the morning, you hang around till 10 o'clock at night. After having 3 children, though my children are now off for college, you sort of want to do things that are maybe more sedentary.
Are you working on another book?
Yes, I'm doing a book called Death of the Heart, which is a true World War II spy story, and it's going to be based on a woman, Elizabeth Pack.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction. All my books, except for one, are nonfiction. I keep on trying to tell narratives that are character-driven and that are true and that will, in their way, relate to the times in which we live, that will resonate across generations and show that the past is never really past.
Howard, I haven't had a chance because we put this all together basically yesterday. What other books have you written?
I wrote a book called Gangland, which is about the Gotti case. I wrote a book, Family of Spies, about the Walker spy family, which was a 6-part CBS miniseries. My most recent book, The Floor of Heaven, which is about the Yukon Gold Rush, is being filmed as we speak for a movie for Fox featured. So this is my 11th. I've been this for a while now.
Well, let us know when Death of a Heart comes out. We'd love to have you back. World War II is kind of a fascinating subject for Clay and I both. My mom played with Anne Frank as a kid. I had a stepfather that was in the German army on the Russian front. My dad was a Canadian soldier, so I've got a lot of background there. So, but yeah, that definitely we'd like to know more about that. We've got about a minute and a half left, but I have another question for you. You made an interesting comment earlier about, your kids live in a world of fear from terrorist attacks. We lived in a world of fear when we grew up, of nuclear holocaust, based on the East versus the West, and what's the difference there between the two? Do you think it's tougher for kids now than it was when we were growing up?
I think it is tougher in many ways. I wrote an editorial for the Wall Street Journal that was published about a month ago called Generation Lockdown. 2 of my kids were involved in lockdowns, one in a suburban Connecticut high school, another one at a great American university. And, this is part of the times in which they live. They live in a time when, the weapons of mass destruction are going to be found to be, the backpacks and pressure cookers that are in our daily lives. I think terrorism and the fear of terrorism is part of the DNA of our times, much more so. then, growing up in fear of nuclear war was part of perhaps my childhood. And that's something that seemed to, the nuclear clock seemed to diminish. I can't seem to imagine terrorism diminishing.
Yeah. Well, Howard, thank you for the time, and we would love to have you back, especially when this thing looks like it's going to turn into a movie. So definitely we want to have you back. Interesting conversation. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180.